evening. On a day, the Indian Army held a press conference detailing how Pakistan Army is supporting infiltration of terrorists in Kashmir, has activated terror launch pads across the line of control and is desperate to inflict a sensational strike in Kashmir. A US congressional report has left Pakistan red-faced, giving details of terrorist groups who enjoy a safe haven there and are allowed by Pakistan to operate from its soil with impunity. As proof continues to mount of Pakistan allowing safe passage for terrorists, our in focus tonight is US report exposes Pakistan as terror factory. I'm Munman Bhattacharya. First up, the headlines. Indian Army eliminates 7 terrorists in 7 days, including 5 on line of control. 19-year-old terrorist apprehended admits he is from Punjab province in Pakistan. Indian Army says Pakistan has activated terror launch pads across LOC. Infiltration taking place with complicity of Pakistan's army. Says Pakistan is desperate to launch a sensational strike in Kashmir. US congressional report exposes Pakistan as a safe haven for terror groups. It says Pakistan is home to at least 12 groups designated as foreign terrorist organizations, including 5 groups such as LET and JEM, which are anti-India. Report says Pakistan allowed groups targeting Afghanistan and India to operate from its territory. Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicates to the nation 35 crop varieties with special traits. Says whenever farmers and agriculture get a safety net, their growth becomes rapid. Highlights the importance of tackling challenges posed by climate change and related events through an alliance of farmers and scientists. President Emmanuel Macron of France reiterates India's centrality to France's Indo-Pacific strategy announced in India in 2018. France and Greece inked strategic deal to buy warships. Macron urges European nations to boost their defense plans and assert their strategic interests. UK's Transport Minister Grant Shapps says fuel crisis is stabilising as petrol stations boost reserves, tankers leave oil depot north of London even as fuel panic persists. Government puts military on standby as part of measures to address the supply chain crisis. North Korea fires missile into sea off East Coast, asserts its right to test weapons given hostile policies. South Korea terms launch regrettable given the need for stability in the Korean peninsula. Japan declares a heightened alert. US says move highlights the destabilizing impact of North Korea's illicit weapons program. China witnesses major supply crisis of power. Nation's industrial sector plunges into crisis. Goldman Sachs estimates that as much as 44% of China's industrial activity has been hit by power shortages. Twists and turns in Punjab politics continue. Navjot Singh Sidhu resigns as Congress State President. Former Chief Minister Captain Amrinder Singh says, "I told you so." He is not a stable man and not fit for the border state of Punjab. Power struggle within the Congress government in the state intensifies. Some ministers in Channu cabinet resign. The first Himalayan Film Festival concludes at the Sindhu Cultural Centre in Leh. Lieutenant Governor of Ladakh R.K. Mathur, Secretary INB Apurva Chandra, filmmaker Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra and other dignitaries grace the closing ceremony. Our top focus tonight, there is more egg on Pakistan's face even as Pakistan continues with its desperate policy of using terrorists in a proxy war against India. A latest congressional report on terrorism has laid bare how Pakistan is home to at least 12 groups designated as foreign terrorist organizations, including India-centric ones such as the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Here's more. Indian Army eliminates 7 terrorists in 1 week. Pakistan activates terror launch pads. Pakistan desperate to strike in Kashmir. Pakistan is doing what it is best known to do, exporting terrorism across borders. The Indian Army announced on Tuesday that it eliminated 7 terrorists that had infiltrated from Pakistan in the last 1 week, 5 of them at the line of control. The army also apprehended a 19-year-old Pakistani terrorist in Uri in Baramulla district who has identified himself as Ali Baba Batra, son of late Muhammad Latif, a resident of Punjab province in Pakistan.
He has admitted that he is a member of Lashkar-e-Taiba. He was trained by that outfit, and giving details of his training, he has revealed that he underwent a 3 weeks course in 2019 at Khyber camp, Gadi Habibullah, Muzaffarabad.
The army said that the infiltration could not have taken place with the active complicity of the Pakistan army.
There has been a lot of movement in the launch pad across line of control. You would recall that their infiltration attempt has also been made on 18th when 3 terrorists were neutralized in the neighboring area.
The army also said that given the recoveries made and the modus operandi of the infiltrating group, they have reason to believe that the terrorist and his accomplices came in to conduct a strike in Kashmir. The infiltration attempt was made in the same area of Samalabad Nala, which has been often used as an infiltration route, including by suicide attackers who targeted the Uri garrison in 2016. Pointing to increased activity on terror launch pads close to LOC, the army revealed that Islamabad was desperate to send in terrorists to create disturbance and carry out a sensational strike in Kashmir.
Now it shows the desperation of Pakistan when he sees that the peace and stability in Kashmir is something that is not to Pakistan's liking. So there is desperation to send in terrorists to create disturbance and some kind of a sensational strike.
The Indian Army's operation comes days after a US congressional report on terrorism that gives details of how Pakistan is home to at least 12 foreign terrorist organizations, including 5 India-centric ones like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. It notes that the LET, formed in 1980s and designated as foreign terrorist organization in 2001, was responsible for the terror attacks in Mumbai as well as numerous other high-profile attacks. On Jaish-e-Mohammed, the report points to how, along with LET, it was responsible for the 2001 attack on the Indian Parliament, among other attacks. The report also acknowledges the presence of other terrorist groups inside Pakistan, such as Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, Islamic State Khorasan province, the Afghan Taliban, the Haqqani Network, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Balochistan Liberation Army, Jundullah, Sipah-e-Sahiba Pakistan and Lashkar-e-Janvi. The congressional reports are prepared by independent experts at periodic intervals for the US lawmakers to take informed decisions. The report further corners Pakistan, grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force, and may further fuel anger within the US strategic community over Pakistan's duplicitous role in Afghanistan. With inputs from Salman Qazi in Kashmir, Bureau Report, DD India. Addressing the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly on Saturday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had pointed to how extremism was on the rise globally and reminded countries that use terrorism as a political tool to not forget that such a strategy is indeed a double-edged sword, meaning such a policy would hurt the aggressor countries as much. Listen in.
विश्व के सामने रिग्रेसिव थिंकिंग और एक्सट्रीमिज्म का खतरा बढ़ता जा रहा है। रिग्रेसिव थिंकिंग के साथ जो देश आतंकवाद का पॉलिटिकल टूल के रूप में इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, उन्हें ये समझना होगा कि आतंकवाद उनके लिए भी उतना ही बड़ा खतरा है। ये सुनिश्चित किया जाना बहुत जरूरी है कि अफगानिस्तान की धरती का इस्तेमाल आतंकवाद फैलाने और आतंकी हमलों के लिए न हो। हमें इस बात के लिए भी सतर्क रहना होगा कि वहां की नाजुक स्थितियों का कोई देश अपने स्वार्थ के लिए एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करने की कोशिश न करे।
In fact, India's Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla had also said that in all the meetings during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's US visit, there was a recognition of the fact that Pakistan nurtures and promotes cross-border terrorism. In fact, both the Quad and India-US joint statements reflect India's concerns on Pakistan's support to terrorism. Listen in.
In all the meetings the Prime Minister had, beginning with US leadership, there was suo motu recognition of the concerns that Pakistan represents as a country that has in many senses both supported and nurtured cross-border terrorism, including in Afghanistan and from Afghanistan. There was a sense that that situation needs to be watched very carefully, and that the international community needs to ensure that Pakistan fulfills its obligation as a member of the Committee of Nations in its basic obligations, that it does not in any way work against the detriment of its neighbors or any other country in the world.
And that brings us to our In Focus tonight, which is US report exposes Pakistan as a terror factory. To talk about that, we have with us Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan, former Director General of ICWA, retired Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. He is former DG Infantry. I welcome you both to Newsnight. Ambassador Raghavan, I'll come to you now. You've seen the contents of the US congressional report. That Pakistan is a safe haven for terrorists is an open secret known to all. With this report having come in and with the US earlier deciding to review its ties with Pakistan, do you see anything changing?
I don't see any significant change emerging either because of this report or because of other factors, because what the report contains has been well known for a very long time. And the fact also is that there is a general recognition amongst most countries that Pakistan is certainly a significant problem because of the sanctuary which numerous extremist and terrorist groups have in it. Whether this will lead to any new policies towards Pakistan at the international level is more difficult to say, but to my mind is unlikely, because as I said, this is not a new problem, and countries in different ways have devised different strategies to deal with it. I think as far as India is concerned, we have to be cognizant of the fact that while it is good that we build up international pressure and build international coalitions, in the end we have to deal with Pakistan on our own, because it is a neighbor and it is going to remain a neighbor. And therefore, while it is significant that there is a recognition and there has been for a long time, the problem which exists in Pakistan with regard to terrorist groups and the encouragement they get from state agencies. Nevertheless, this is an issue which we have to deal with on our own and take significant steps, both short-term tactical measures as also longer-term policies and strategies.
Yes, General Kulkarni, do you agree that India is effectively dealing with the terror problem? 7 terrorists eliminated in 7 days, 5 on the LOC, 1 terrorist caught alive who's admitted that he is from Pakistan, and the intelligence reports say that terror launch pads have been activated by Pakistan, which is keen on striking India with a sensational strike. So with India having so much information at its command, do you think that India is dealing with the problem effectively?
Definitely, Monmon, definitely. Primarily because inputs were coming that Pakistan would now use these Taliban fighters along with the Pakistani militants and the use of the ISI. They've been in touch with the sleeper cells in India. There was also a tie-up with the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Harkatul Ansar, all these militant organizations. And therefore, there were enough inputs to come in. And Pakistan, definitely, the Pakistan Army's single point agenda is hate India. and the government of Pakistan is using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. There's no denying the fact. And the Prime Minister has rightly said, we are all killing militants, but we aren't killing the ideology of this militancy, which now needs to be really targeted, because it's Pakistan, and it's all along has been Pakistan, and Pakistan now can't fool the world. But we have got to be alert, irrespective of what, because Pakistan, since it has decided to do what it is doing now, and more so when it has support of China also, and has managed to now find its firm foothold in Afghanistan through its Haqqani network, which is nothing but a Pakistani ISI propped up organization. And both Taliban and Pakistan are two sides of the same coin. Having done that, now Pakistan's only desire is to get its Durand line internationalized and make sure that it is a boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which it seems very difficult. But yes, Pakistan will continue to do it. We have to be vigilant. We are vigilant. The anti-infiltration grid is in place, but they will be using all kinds of innovative means. They'll use drones. They'll send people from the Indo-Nepal border. They'll use Bangladesh border. They'll use all kinds of whatever way they come, because the festive season, which is now in India, is the one which the ISI has decided to target all of these, so that there's enough chaos which can be by them to be held and conducted in the valley and also anywhere in India. And therefore, we have to be vigilant. And not only that, even the ISI Khorasan group, these are nothing but breakaways of Taliban, breakaways of the militant organization of Al-Qaeda, and it is nothing but a Pakistani propped up ISI terrorist organization, which also have some kind of, I would say, sympathy extending right from Kerala going up to Kashmir. So our vigilance has to be topped without fail. We have got to monitor all of it. Agencies have to work 24/7. The military has to ensure that the anti-infiltration grid is not at all compromised at any point of time. And I'm so glad that the GOC briefing gives enough indications of it being alert. And that is how, in the last about 7 days, 7 militants have been knocked out. And this 19-year-old boy who seems to have surrendered now seems to be giving away how Pakistan's role, which we all along have been saying so, that Pakistan is involved, Pakistan is using terrorism as an instrument of state policy, and most of the UN designated terrorists are in Pakistan. It goes without saying. Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Proof on that account is piling up. Ambassador Raghavan, there is some credible, meaningful action that the US can take. In the past, it's tied up its financial support to Pakistan with the action that it takes against terror sanctuaries. Now, also, there is the option of taking away the status of a major non-NATO ally from Pakistan. Do you see US taking any credible, meaningful action, or do you suspect that it will continue to be dependent on Pakistan for intelligence cooperation and for providing territory for staging any drone attacks by the US on any terrorist sanctuaries?
See, any country's policy is based on its own self-interests and how it sees those self-interests. It's unrealistic on our part to expect the United States to act in terms of how we see our self-interests. They will act in terms of how they define their interests. So certainly, while there are some steps they could take if it suits them, but we must be very clear, they are going to take those steps if it suits them, not if it suits us. I think as far as India is concerned, we have to be cognizant of the fact that Pakistan is 200 million people. It is a nuclear weapons state. And by and large, it has a capacity to survive, regardless of the external pressure which is being brought on it. So certainly, because of our history, because of the nature of these terrorist groups which exist in Pakistan, we should strengthen our counter-terrorism grid to the fullest extent possible. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we cannot deal with Pakistan simply as an issue to be settled on the border or on the LOC. We need a longer-term policy, and that longer-term policy, by its very nature, has to be a policy based on diplomacy and foreign policy. So I think a combination of both of these, the counter-terrorism grid, your defensive postures, your own military strengths, all of those factors are very important. But we should not forget in the process that you also have diplomatic and foreign policy tools for dealing with Pakistan. And those should not be consigned as measures which are ineffective or which cannot be used. I don't think we should put ourselves in a position where we expect other countries to see Pakistan in the same way as we do, and therefore take measures which we want them to take. They will take measures in their interest. They will not take measures which are in your interest or depending on what you say or what you expect.
Right, Ambassador Raghavan, but when Antony Blinken tells the US Congress that US has decided to review its ties with Pakistan, what is the kind of concession that it wants from Pakistan?
I think they expect Pakistan to be more flexible, to respond to US demands with regard to terrorist groups, which US may be more concerned about as far as their own security is concerned. They may expect more Pakistani cooperation with regard to certain developments in Afghanistan. But the fact is, statements of the kind which have come recently from the US Secretary of State and others have been made in the past also. It is not as if one statement signals a structural change in US foreign policy or in their behavior. As I said, Pakistan is a country of 200 million people. It has nuclear weapons. It has a major strategic alliance with China. US policy will be based on those factors also. We have to devise our own policy in terms of what is in our national interest and not make it dependent on what other countries may do or may not do.
General Kulkarni, is there a fear that the sequence of events as they played out in Afghanistan would embolden other terrorist groups, many of which are in Pakistan currently, as this US congressional report points out? Because the situation was created to a large extent by Pakistan. It was instrumental in the return of the Taliban. So, if that is indeed the case, then in the absence of appropriate action, is the international community deluding itself?
No doubt. I think the international community, I'm surprised sometimes that how is it that they are not able to see things in the correct perspective. There is no denying the fact. Even in Taliban 1996, 2001, what did they say? They said it was Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. What did they do? They did absolutely look at the way they treated women. Look at the way the human rights were violated. There is nothing. There is just no change. Leopards don't change their spot. Obviously, what you're saying is right. They will embolden all of us. You'll find problems. Al-Qaeda, what they're talking about, is nothing but yet another replica of Taliban. You have ISI, Khorasan, nothing but the breakaway groups of Taliban and Al-Qaeda. You have all these groups, all of them will now start thinking the world over that this is the way to go about. Whatever be it, you'll have a state support, countries like Pakistan supporting this terrorist organization. You have financial support. Imagine in 1996, also China was in touch with Taliban to give a military support to them. Look at the way these people have come about and look at the way they have support. And that is the reason why there will be terrorists now thinking that this is the easiest way now to take charge of the countries like this. And they are a big threat to the international community. They are a big threat to us, obviously, because all these terrorist organizations, unfortunately, happen to be so much closer to India. That is one. The second thing is, whatever we might do, however hard that we might do, the way Pakistan is going about, the way Qatar is going about, the way the Chinese are going about wanting recognition for a terrorist organization, there is no denying the fact. Even in Taliban 1, there was no UN recognition. Now also the world must not recognize whatever be it. Why isn't Pakistan recognizing it? Why isn't China recognizing it? Why isn't Qatar recognizing it? All those were forward countries looking at it and so sort of facilitated the entire thing of Taliban. Taliban has gone back on its promises. Taliban has not kept its promise. And the way Taliban is still doing what it is known for, absolutely, the way it is treating women, the way it is massacring people, the way it is going house to house and ensuring that the people who they thought had run against Taliban are being killed. What is this indicative of? And still we are wanting to go about saying, no, we need to now engage with Taliban so that they don't become a bigger threat. Nothing doing. They just need to be sorted out. The entire world must make sure, not just sort out Afghanistan, Taliban, but also Pakistan, which is the root cause of what is going on in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the best way to deal with such a condition or such a situation, like Ambassador Raghavan also pointed out, is to strengthen your own hands. Well, thank you, General Kulkarni, as well as Ambassador Raghavan, for having joined us with your views. Well, days after tensions ratcheted between France and US and Australia, with Australia dumping its submarine deal with France and entering into another submarine deal with the US, UK, French President Emmanuel Macron has reaffirmed that France has a steadfast Indo-Pacific policy. Macron asserted that France considers itself as an Indo-Pacific power since it has more than 1 million citizens living in the region and over 8,000 soldiers deployed there, with several joint operations organized with several partners in the region. Macron's statement comes after France signed a defense deal with Greece for sale of warships worth several billions of euros. The European Union has also unveiled a new strategy for boosting economic, political and defense ties in the Indo-Pacific area.
French President Emmanuel Macron urging European nations to boost their defense plans and make themselves respected. This as France opens talks with the United States to try to restore confidence after the AUKUS deal led to a major diplomatic crisis.
The Europeans must stop being naive. When we are under pressure from powers which at times harden their stance, we need to react and show that we too have the power and the capacity to defend ourselves. We should not give in to escalation. It's simply about being respected.
Macron was speaking just after France signed a defense deal with Greece, including the purchase by Athens of 3 warships worth several billion euros. In changing regional dynamics, the AUKUS trilateral security partnership between Australia, the UK and the US is aimed at helping Australia develop nuclear-powered attack submarines. A fallout was Australia pulling out of a $90 billion submarine deal with France. The European Union unveiled earlier this month a new strategy for boosting economic, political and defense ties in the Indo-Pacific area. The common thread in all these changing alignments is the Indo-Pacific and countering China. Macron firmly states France's claim to being an Indo-Pacific power.
The Australian decision to cancel submarine deal with France does not change France's Indo-Pacific strategy. France's strategy was announced in early 2018 in India. We have several partners in the region and there too, history and geography is unchangeable. France is an Indo-Pacific power regardless of any contract, since we have more than 1 million citizens living in the region and we have more than 8,000 soldiers deployed there, with several joint operations organized with several partners in the region.
Macron described the US as a great historical friend and ally in terms of values both nations share. But on a somewhat bitter note, he pointed out that over the last decade, Americans first focused on themselves and their strategic interests reoriented towards China and the Pacific. He added that he will talk to President Joe Biden in mid-October before a scheduled in-person meeting at the end of next month in Europe. France, for the first time ever, withdrew its ambassadors to Washington and Canberra in response to the AUKUS deal. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And for more perspective on this, we are joined by Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former Indian ambassador to France. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, welcome to Newsnight. Is there one concern that binds the US, the EU, including France, UK, Australia, Japan, India, and that is the belligerence of one country which is showing hegemony in different ways?
Yes, there is that fear, but my own sense is that the Indo-Pacific is a large enough region to accommodate all these powers. I know it's getting a little bit crowded, frankly, even to my liking, but I am thinking that there could be a hub and spoke system in the Indo-Pacific where you can have some countries play to their strengths, and the military part of it can be done by AUKUS. There is a great role for the Quad, I think, in the Indo-Pacific, and we can always involve ASEAN, France, and other countries and other powers also in the region. As I said, the region is vast enough to really accommodate different roles for different powers.
Absolutely. And we heard French President Emmanuel Macron say that France had enunciated its Indo-Pacific policy when Macron was in India. And having said that, do you think that both the ASEAN countries as well as India play a central role in countries' Indo-Pacific strategy?
I think the centrality of ASEAN and the centrality of India needs to be distinguished, frankly, if you ask me. I think in terms of architectures which are already established, ASEAN is far ahead. They've got the ASEAN Regional Forum, they've got the East Asia Summit, they've got a lot of architecture already established. So when the declarations on Quad or Indo-Pacific talk about ASEAN centrality, they are talking in terms of using the architecture that has already been crafted and constructed. When you and I talk of Indian centrality, I always think of Indian Ocean, especially I think of the eastern shores of Africa, the western part of India, West Asia, which does not quite fall into the American definition of Indo-Pacific. And there I see a lot of potential for India cooperating with France. France is a resident power in the Indian Ocean. So Macron is quite right to say that. They've got the largest economic zone in Indian Ocean. They've got 2 million citizens, if you combine Nouvelle Caledonia and Reunion Islands, and they've got permanent troops stationed in the region. So it's really the European resident power in Indo-Pacific. And India and France go back a long way, as you know. And I think I see a special role for India and France, at least on the sector of west of India and the eastern part of Africa. I think there is a lot we can do together.
Absolutely. Let me take that further. When there was a telephone conversation recently between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Emmanuel Macron, Mr. Macron spoke about how France can do a lot for India's strategic autonomy. What sense do you make out of that?
So I think I've always said that India doesn't have the tradition of producing a white paper on foreign policy, but the French do. And when I was ambassador there, I always used to joke with my French friends that we could just translate the French white paper into English and replace the word France with India. And that was pretty much an Indian foreign policy white paper. The expression strategic autonomy, as you rightly said, really is a common platform for both countries. Both countries value their independence. It's true that the events of Ladakh have pushed India in one direction, and you know what I'm talking about. But I think France values its independence, and even France's relationship with NATO, as you know, is quite tempestuous. They were not part of NATO, and it was Sarkozy who then made sure that France was part of NATO. And even now, France, when it talks of strategic autonomy, it talks in terms of Europe having an independent defense and security policy. When India talks of strategic autonomy, we are talking about how we can combine with various strategic partners, which include countries like United States, of course, but also Japan, also Russia. So in that sense, the concept of strategic autonomy is essentially more space for maneuver as far as France and India are concerned.
Ambassador Kumar, the European Union earlier this month unveiled a new strategy of boosting defense, economic and political ties in the Indo-Pacific. Is a multilateral order at the heart of such a vision?
Yes, I have gone through that paper and it's very interesting. The EU has been consulting with its member states, and because of the nature of the European Union, it takes them time to come out with a common policy or a common position paper. The EU states very clearly that they have vital stakes in the Indo-Pacific. They accept the fact that the center of political and economic gravity has shifted to the Indo-Pacific. Having said that, they feel that there must be a European way of doing things in the Indo-Pacific. They specifically mention China both as a country with which they need to talk and engage, but also take on when it comes to differences. So this is the dual strategy which EU has, and which makes it very, very different from the United States strategy vis-a-vis China. European Union strategy is that China is necessary and you must engage China when it comes to climate change, nuclear non-proliferation and so on, but also take them on when it comes to differences in approach with regard to human rights, with regard to pluralism, values, religion, etc. So the EU has got this dual approach, if you like, with China. But otherwise, their approach in Indo-Pacific is not very different from India's in terms of sustainable development, in terms of keeping the sea lanes of communication open, because both EU and India, we have a significant proportion of our trade which goes through the South China Sea and which goes through the sea lanes of Indian Ocean. So if EU and India have to prosper in terms of trade, we need these sea lanes of communication open, and there I see a commonality of interest between EU and India.
Right, Ambassador Kumar, thank you so much for having joined us to tell us about the Indo-Pacific region and how various equations are playing out there. Well, let's move on now. In international news, drivers in UK are queuing up for fuel in scenes that are reminiscent of the 1970s, creating a national crisis out of something that was initially a relatively minor logistics problem. Government ministers, fuel companies and petrol stations say there are sufficient supplies of fuel, but that the lack of truckers combined with panic buying has created chaos in the world's fifth largest economy. More in this report.
Britain has put the army on standby to deliver fuel from Tuesday after an acute shortage of truckers triggered panic buying that left fuel pumps dry across the land and raised fears that hospitals would be left without doctors and nurses. Up to 150 military tanker drivers will prepare to deliver to forecourts which have run dry because of panic buying. Meanwhile, queues of drivers snaked back from those petrol stations that were still serving in major cities, though dozens of forecourts were closed with signs saying that their petrol and diesel had run dry. A post-Brexit shortage of lorry drivers, exacerbated by a debilitating halt to truck driving license testing during COVID lockdowns, has sown chaos through British supply chains, raising the spectre of shortages and price rises in the run-up to Christmas. But taxi drivers claim it is a massive worry for them.
Apart from the anxiety of not being able to work on the back of 18 months of not knowing what's going on, where the next job's coming from. We've just started to get some work and now we've been hit with this. It's massive. Friends of mine have not been able to come to work this morning because they're so low, they can't risk coming out and running out. It's really, really worrying.
I just started looking last night. I was driving around for 2 hours. Nothing came by Aldi's up this way, up at Park Royal. Nothing. Got a delivery at Park Royal Asda at about 10 o'clock last night, but the queues were crazy. But it doesn't seem like this. They keep saying there's no shortage. But it's just kind of, everyone's panicking now.
It was very hard. Early in the morning, I just got up and tried to go Asda. Fuel station empty, then 2 others empty. This is the 4th one, and I have no fuel. I'm nearly going to East London now.
Meanwhile, UK's Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has said that fuel crisis is starting to stabilise as gas stations have replenished some reserves.
We are seeing the first very tentative signs of stabilisation of stock within the forecourt network itself. That won't necessarily be apparent in the queues at this stage, but this may be the hopeful sign, and so we'll keep a very close eye on this before doing anything further, and ensuring that as long as we all go back to our normal habits, then normality will return much quicker.
UK's Environment Minister George Eustice says there is no shortage of fuel and problems were being caused by consumers panic buying fuel that they didn't need.
We can only continue to reassure people that we have plenty of petrol, both in storage, coming out of those refineries as well. And the only reason that we have an issue at the moment with some petrol stations not having petrol in the forecourts is that people are buying petrol and they wouldn't. The most important thing everyone can do is just get back to normal, fill their cars up as they normally would, and not buy petrol unless they need it.
Meanwhile, government ministers, fuel companies and petrol stations say there are sufficient supplies of fuels, but the lack of truckers combined with panic buying has strained the system. The demand for fuel has meant that 50 to 90% of pumps were dry in some areas of Britain, according to the Petrol Retailers Association, which represents independent fuel retailers who account for 65% of all the 8,380 UK forecourts. Bureau Report, DD India.
China is witnessing an unprecedented power supply crisis that has turned critical in recent days, threatening the entire power grids as industrial production grinds to a halt and traffic lights fail amid power rationing. With more than half of the country enduring power cuts, making it one of the most extreme energy rationing in the nation's history, especially as it hit regular households. It has triggered widespread alarm among much of the population and plunging the nation's industrial sector into chaos. Poor communication and unclear timeline for power rationing has worsened the confusion, with many angry and confused residents taking their complaints to social media. The power cuts are mainly due to insufficient coal supply. As temperatures drop in China's northeast, residents have started to turn up the heating, driving up electricity usage. Many companies, including small firms, have had to shift production to overnight, reduce output or cease operations entirely. Experts also expect the wide-reaching impacts of the dramatic cuts in energy consumption to last until the end of the year. North Korea fired a short-range missile into sea off its east coast, asserting its right to test weapons given hostile policies. South Korea has termed the launch regrettable given the need for stability in Korean Peninsula. Japan has declared a heightened alert, while the US has said that the move highlights the destabilizing impact of North Korea's illicit weapons program.
The Korean Peninsula was back in focus with North Korea firing an unidentified projectile towards the sea off its coast on Tuesday, less than 2 weeks after it tested a new railway-borne missile system, South Korea's military said without giving any more details.
We think the missile launch is regrettable at a time when we urgently need to stabilize the situation in the Korean Peninsula.
Announcing the news of the launch, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga declared a heightened alert. It is still unclear if the projectile landed inside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Earlier this month, North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles, both of which the Japanese government said fell into their exclusive economic zone.
Early this morning, North Korea has launched what could possibly be ballistic missile. The Japanese government will more than ever heighten alert and surveillance. In any case, we are currently analyzing the situation of the launch.
The US State Department condemned North Korea's missile test, which poses a threat to neighbors and the international community, and urged Pyongyang to return to stall denuclearization talks. A statement by the US Indo-Pacific Command said, "The missile launch highlights the destabilizing impact of DPRK's illicit weapon program." Meanwhile, North Korea on Monday accused the United States of hostility and demanded the Biden administration permanently end joint military exercises with South Korea, even as it continued its recent streak of weapons tests apparently aimed at pressurizing Washington and Seoul over slow nuclear diplomacy. Its ambassador to the United Nations insisted that it had the right to test weapons. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
On to national news now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicated to the nation 35 crop varieties with special traits today. He also dedicated to the nation the newly constructed campus of the National Institute of Biotech Stress Management at Raipur. On the occasion, he also distributed the Green Campus Award to agricultural universities and interacted with farmers who use innovative methods. Prime Minister said that when science, government and society work together, results are better, and an alliance of farmers and scientists will strengthen the country in dealing with new challenges. Here's more.
The Narendra Modi government is committed to the welfare of farmers and is continuously taking steps to ensure the same. Adding another chapter towards farmers' welfare, Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicated to the nation 35 crop varieties with special traits through video conference. He said this launch will benefit small farmers the most.
ये नई वैरायटीज मौसम की कई तरह की चुनौतियों से निपटने में सक्षम तो है ही, इनमें पौष्टिक तत्व भी ज्यादा है। इनमें से कुछ वैरायटी कम पानी वाले क्षेत्रों के लिए है, कुछ क्रॉप गंभीर रोगों से सुरक्षित है।
The crop varieties with special traits have been developed by the Indian Council of Agricultural Research to address the twin challenges of climate change and malnutrition. In recent years, more than 1,300 such seed variants across different crops have been developed. 35 such crop varieties with special traits like climate resilience and higher nutrient content have been developed in the year 2021. The Prime Minister stressed that whenever farmers and the agriculture sector get a safety net, their growth becomes rapid. He said efforts are being made to take the farmer out of the crop-based income system and encourage them for value addition and other farming options.
कोविड के दौरान गेहूं खरीद केंद्रों की संख्या 3 गुना तक बढ़ाई है। किसान सम्मान निधि के तहत 11 करोड़ से अधिक हमारे हर किसान को, और उसमें ज्यादातर छोटे किसान हैं, ऐसे किसानों को करीब करीब 1.5 लाख करोड़ से भी ज्यादा रुपए सीधे उनके बैंक अकाउंट के पास भेजे गए।
The Prime Minister said that his government is using science and technology on priority basis to solve challenges related to agriculture.
ये बीज से बाजार तक का जो पूरा इकोसिस्टम है, देश उसे जो तैयार कर रहा है, उसे हमें लगातार आधुनिक बनाते रहना है। इसमें आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, डेटा एनालिटिक्स और ब्लॉकचेन टेक्नोलॉजी डिमांड और सप्लाई, इससे जुड़ी चुनौतियों को दूर करने में बहुत मदद कर सकती है। देश का हर किसान, विशेष रूप से छोटा किसान, इन नए उपकरणों, नई टेक्नोलॉजी का उपयोग करेगा तो कृषि सेक्टर में बड़े परिवर्तन आएंगे।
He also interacted with farmers who use innovative farming methods.
कैसे करती हैं आप?
थोड़ी सी जमीन है और ये फलों से माला माल है सर, तो इसलिए इसमें अंगूर, सेब, चेरी, अखरोट, आड़ू की पैदावार है सर।
फौजी रहे हैं, आपने पहले देश की सेवा की, अब ये धरती माता की सेवा करने में लग गए हैं आप।
हम फौज में रहने के बाद घर में आकर के लोगों को पेट भरने के लिए जितना भी हम उपार्जन करना हमारा कर्म है।
The Prime Minister also dedicated to the nation the newly constructed campus of the National Institute of Biotic Stress Management, Raipur. On this occasion, the Prime Minister also distributed the Green Campus Award to agricultural universities. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, twists and turns continued in Punjab politics, with power struggle between Punjab government and Punjab Congress intensifying after Navjot Singh Sidhu resigned as state Congress president. Former Chief Minister Captain Amrinder Singh said, "I told you so." He's not a stable man and not fit for the border state of Punjab. Adding to the trouble in the state government, some ministers in Channu cabinet have resigned.
Rift in Congress party further widened on Tuesday after Punjab Congress's new president Navjot Singh Sidhu resigned just after 71 days. Congress infighting had come to the fore on 18th of September after the Congress party had removed Captain Amrinder Singh from the post of Chief Minister following pressure from Sidhu. Charanjit Singh Channi was made the new Chief Minister of Punjab. On Tuesday, Navjot Singh Sidhu submitted his resignation by writing a letter to the Congress interim president Sonia Gandhi. In his resignation, Sidhu wrote that the collapse of a man's character stems from the compromise corner. I can never compromise on Punjab's future and the agenda for the welfare of Punjab. Therefore, I hereby resign as the president of Punjab Pradesh Congress Committee. Will continue to serve the Congress. After his resignation, Captain Amarinder Singh once again targeted Sidhu. In a tweet he wrote, I told you so. He's not a stable man and not fit for the border state of Punjab.
And I say, absolutely, I don't tweet unless I mean it. And what is my tweet, you can quote.
आपको लगता है कि सिद्धू साहब की वजह से आपको अपना पोस्ट गंवाना पड़ा, अब वो भी उन्होंने रिजाइन कर दिया। आपको लगता है कि उनकी वजह से ही आपको अपना पोस्ट गंवाना पड़ा, आपको इस्तीफा देना पड़ा?
नहीं,
गलत फैसला था।
That was nothing to do with Sidhu. सिद्धू को जब मैं कह रहा हूँ कि अनस्टेबल, तो उसको ने कोई रिएक्शन तो होगा ही, कुछ कहा होगा, मैंने किसी को कुछ नहीं कहा।
After the resignation of Navjot Singh Sidhu, the newly appointed Chief Minister of Punjab, Charanjit Singh Channi, said that he is not aware of Sidhu's resignation. Meanwhile, BJP, Shiromani Akali Dal and Aam Aadmi Party said Sidhu's resignation is a result of tussle within Congress.
कांग्रेस पार्टी खुद अपनी चालबाजी की चक्रव्यूह में चकनाचूर हो रही है और ये कांग्रेस पार्टी वो कांग्रेस पार्टी है जिसकी नीतियां और जिसके कार्यक्रम और जिसके नेतृत्व पूरी तरह से नकारात्मकता से भरपूर रहे हैं और जिसका क्या असर उनके ऊपर दिखाई पड़ रहा है।
नवजोत सिद्धू है, आप मिसगाइडेड मजाइल है, एदा पता नहीं किदे ते डिगूगा ते किनू मारूगा।
पूरी महाभारत सत्ता की है और कुर्सी की है। इनको पंजाब की गवर्नेंस से, पंजाब के लोगों से, उनकी समस्याओं से कोई लेना देना नहीं है। सिर्फ अपनी कुर्सी की लड़ाई ये लोग लड़ रहे हैं।
Congress leader Rahul Gandhi attended a public event in Delhi, but he also did not talk about Navjot Singh Sidhu's resignation. Bureau Report, DD India.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah attended the 17th Foundation Day celebrations of National Disaster Management Authority as the chief guest in New Delhi on Tuesday. This year, the theme has been Stopping Impact of Disaster Incidents in the Himalayan Region. Amit Shah released a training manual of Aapda Mitra scheme and plan documents of Aapda Mitra and common alerting protocol. He hailed NDMA and NDRF and State Disaster Response Force for transforming disaster management in the country.
$350 आपदा से प्रभावित होने वाले जिलों में आपदा मित्र स्कीम को हम लागू करने जा रहे हैं और ये शुरुआत मैं मानता हूं कि सबसे महत्वपूर्ण शुरुआत अब तक 17 सालों में जो हुआ है, इसको वैज्ञानिक तरीके से कैसे इसके सामने लड़ा जा सकता है। ढेर सारे प्रोटोकॉल, ढेर सारे एसओपी बनाए गए, परंतु प्रोटोकॉल और एसओपी को जमीन पर उतारने के लिए, प्रोटोकॉल और एसओपी को तुरंत कुछ सेकंड में रिस्पॉन्ड करने के लिए अब 350 जिलों में ये व्यवस्था हो जाएगी। और भारत सरकार ने एक बहुत बड़ा निर्णय किया है कि सारे वॉलंटियर्स का बीमा भी भारत सरकार लेने वाली है, जिससे कम से कम एक प्रकार की आश्वस्तता उनके मन के अंदर रहेगी, उनके परिवार के अंदर भी रहने वाली।
Niti Ayog's CEO Amitabh Kant participated in a DD News conclave where he talked about the Aspirational Districts program, which focuses on 112 of India's most developmentally challenged districts across sectors. The program was launched in January 2018 and is spearheaded by Prime Minister himself. At the central level, it is steered by Niti Ayog in active partnership with state governments and district administrations. Niti Ayog CEO Amitabh Kant said that after the launch of this program, positive changes have been seen in the infrastructure and other areas in those districts.
मैं एक और कार्यक्रम सब नीति आयोग में हम लोग चलाते हैं जिसको हम एस्पिरेशनल डिस्ट्रिक्ट प्रोग्राम कहते हैं, जिसको माननीय प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा इसको ये बैकवर्ड डिस्ट्रिक्ट है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा इसको बैकवर्ड मत कहिए, आप लोग एस्पिरेशनल कहिए, तो हम एस्पिरेशनल कहते हैं। ये देश के आकांक्षी जिले हैं 112 जिले, और इन 112 जिलों में हमने रियल टाइम मॉनिटरिंग की, हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट को रैंक किया और हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट में अब आप देखते हैं तो लर्निंग आउटकम का बहुत बड़ा बदलाव आया है, हेल्थ आउटकम का बदलाव आया है, स्किल्स में इम्प्रूवमेंट हुआ है, कृषि में बदलाव आया है और बेसिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर वहाँ इम्प्रूव हुआ है इन सारे जिलों में 112, और ये देश के सबसे पिछड़े हुए और सबसे बहुत ही मुश्किल जिले थे।
The IAS committee in New Delhi felicitated badminton player Suhas Elvai, who won a silver medal in Tokyo Paralympics. Suhas Yathiraj is an IAS officer and is currently working as district magistrate of Noida. On the occasion, Olympic gold medalist Neeraj Chopra, also known as Golden Boy, was also honoured for bagging the Olympics gold medal. Union Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur congratulated Suhas through a video message and said that he will be an inspiration for many.
Congratulations, Suhas. I'm sure we will see some more officers at the podium in the times ahead. Keep inspiring and keep motivating others who can do this for the country. The success of our citizens is the rise, roar and arrival of 1 billion on the world stage.
Speaking on the achievement of IAS Suhas Yathiraj, Durga Shankar, IAS committee's chairman, said that officers engaged in administrative services across the country are not only working towards nation building but are also contributing in the field of sports, and we are all very proud of Suhas.
He has a passion for sports and he has achieved it. He has done us all very proud, so we can all make others proud by doing that as an individual capacity.
And the first Himalayan Film Festival concluded on Tuesday after running for 5 days. The closing ceremony was held at Sindhu Sanskriti Kendra in Leh in the Union Territory of Ladakh. The function was attended by Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting Apurva Chandra, Ladakh Lieutenant Governor R.K. Mathur, filmmaker Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra and other dignitaries. The 5-day film festival was a part of celebrations of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav commemorating 75 years of India's independence. Films under various categories were awarded at the conclusion of the festival. The last film of the festival, Shepherdess of the Glaciers, was also screened at the closing ceremony. The Lieutenant Governor R.K. Mathur said that UT administration of Ladakh will try to organize a film festival every year.
A film festival here in Leh or in Kargil every year. That is the first thing. Second, that we would like certificate courses, degrees from the FTII Pune in Ladakh, for which we are working. We are reasonably sure of assistance and help from the Ministry of Information Broadcasting.
In his address, INB Secretary Apurva Chandra stressed that film festivals globally present an opportunity for local filmmakers from the region to narrate their stories to a wider audience. He also said that a cinema hall will be set up in Leh during the next 1 year.
लद्दाख में एक भी पिक्चर हॉल नहीं है, तो किसी तरह से आप एक पिक्चर हॉल शुरू कराएं जिससे लोगों में आकर्षण बना रहे। अगले वर्ष जब फिल्म फेस्टिवल हो तो एक पिक्चर हॉल कम से कम यहाँ पर रहे, क्योंकि पिक्चर हॉल का जो अनुभव है वो एक अलग है। आज OTT प्लेटफॉर्म आ गए हैं, हम घर पे सब देखते हैं, पर फिर भी पिक्चर हॉल का जो फिल्मकार है उसके लिए पिक्चर हॉल से बड़ा अनुभव कोई नहीं।
Filmmaker Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra suggested that the festival be named as International Himalayan Festival.
It is showcasing stories told, and there are millions and billions of stories to be told from this land. Dramatic stories, stories of displacement, stories of kids from here going all over the world to study. All those experiences will manifest in the stories we have to tell. The only thing I would like to very humbly ask all the filmmakers and writers who are conceiving their next film is to go world.
And with that, we come to the close of this edition of Newsnight. Stay tuned to DD India.